Inverse functions is what we're going to look at in this video. It's split into 4 parts. We're going to start off by looking at examples like this, or how do you find the inverse of this function, and something a little bit harder like this. We're then going to move on to looking at examples where you've got to substitute a value when you find the inverse. Then we're going to look at examples where you have 2 x's in the function of x, and then we're going to look at exam questions. And the exam questions we're going to look at are 2 real exam questions. That's this one here, and that's this one here. Now, the way my videos work, I'm going to do the example on the left, which is I do. You are then going to press pause and I've got the example on the right, which is you do. So with this example, we have been asked to find the inverse of x for this function. The inverse is just the opposite. So for example, the inverse of plus would be minus. Okay, now to find the inverse of this, there's a few steps you have to follow. So step 1, we're going to replace this with y. So that becomes y is equal to 3x plus 5. Now we are going to rearrange this for x. So that then becomes... So all I've now done is I've rearranged the formula for x. X is now the subject, and now all I need to do is replace x and y. So I'm going to swap x and y around. So that's going to be, if I just grab my highlighter, I'm just going to swap this and this around. And I'm just going to do, well, that's x minus 5 over 3 is equal to y. So all I've done there is I've swapped them 2 around. That's gone there, and that's gone there. And now that is my final answer. So I can now replace y, the inverse, and that becomes that. So just to recap that, step 1, you're going to replace this with y. That's what we did. Step 2 is to make x the formula. And step 3, once x is the formula, replace x and y, and then you've pretty much got your answer. That's your answer. You just need to replace this y with this inverse function. And now how do you know if this is the inverse? Because we can test this. So if I put a value of 2 into here, for example, that means I'm going to multiply. So let's just do that. So that becomes 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 5, which is 11. So that's it, that. So now the inverse is saying, well, actually, if I put this into the inverse, which is the 11, I should end up with 2. So let's test that. If I put 11 into here, which is the inverse, do I end up with an answer of 2? Well, 11 minus 5, divide that by 6. So that's going to be 6 over 3, which becomes 2. So you can see how that works. So hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. So step 1, replace that with a y. Step 1's nice and easy. Step 2, rearrange the equation for x. So we want to make x the subject. Step 3, we're now going to swap x and y around. So all we need to do is swap this, and that just becomes x minus 3 over 2 is equal to y. And then finally, we just need to replace the y with that there. And that then becomes x minus 3 over 2 is equal to the inverse of x. And you can always test your answer. All you need to do is substitute a value into here, and whatever answer you get, substitute that into here, and it should get you back to where you started from. So moving on to something slightly more tricky. So again, exact same steps. Replace that with y. Make x the subject, so I can move the 2 over. And since it's a square root, this will become a square. And once I've rearranged it, all I need to do is swap x and y. And that is my answer. So I just need to write it as. So hopefully you can see the steps we're following. It's the exact same step. That's step 1. Step 2 is just sort of swapping the 2 around. And then step 3 is just replacing the f of x with the y. So again, hopefully, the way you started this one is you put the y there, replace that. Then you made x the subject. Then you swapped x and y. And that is your answer. Moving on, again, just a slightly trickier one with rearranging. So step 1's the exact same. All the steps are the exact same. In fact, you just got to be able to rearrange this. So to rearrange this, I'm going to multiply both sides by y. So that gives me 3y. I'm going to move the 10 over to the other side. So that gives me minus 10. And then finally, I'm going to square root it because it's a square on that side. So that is how you rearrange for x. Now that we've got that, we need to swap x and y around. And that is your answer. So hopefully you can see how following these steps leads you to your answer. So again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at this. So swap that with y. Now rearrange this equation for x. So that's 2y plus 12, square root all of that is equal to x. Now swap x and y around. So that becomes 2x plus 12 is equal to y. And that is your answer, but you want to replace the y with the inverse function. Simple. That's it there. So here's some practice questions for you to have a go at. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. Now moving on. So this is the exact same question, but now we've been given a value in here. So we need to find the value of this. So step one's the same. We need to first find the inverse function. So replace f of x with y. Rearrange this equation to make x the subject. Swap x and y around. And get your inverse function. So we've now gotten this far, but there's one extra step to this now. We need to find the inverse of 2. So when 2 goes into this, that becomes 2 minus 5 over 3. So 2 minus 5 is going to be minus 3. Divide that by 3, so the answer becomes minus 1. So on the right, again, hopefully you did the exact same thing. So replace that with y, rearrange that for x, and then you end up with swapping these two around. And that is your inverse function. And now you just substitute the value of 3 in there. So that becomes, well, the inverse with the 3 going in. So that's 3 minus 3 over 2. Well, 3 minus 3 is 0. So that just ends up with 0. So moving on. Now we have examples where x appears more than once in the equation. Now with these, it's the exact same. It's slightly trickier to rearrange because there's two x's, but the exact same concept applies again. So with these ones, what you want to do is exactly the same steps we did before. So replace the y with the f of x. Rearrange this to make x the subject. So we can move the x minus 3 here. Now we want to expand this. Now we want to get the x's on the same side. So I'm going to move the x to the left. And I'm going to move the y to the right. And now I'm going to factorize the x out. So this really is a test of seeing how well you are at rearranging equations. And that is that. And now if I just move this all over to the left, so I've got a bit more space to work with. So the next step here would be to swap x and y around. So we can say y is equal to 3x over x minus 1. And we can say f of x is just going to be 3x over x minus 1. So again, hopefully you've pressed pause and had a go at the example on the right. So we have y, 2x minus 1 over 3x. We want to rearrange it for x, so that's 3xy is equal to 2x minus 1. Move the x's to the left. Factorize the x. And you end up with x is equal to minus 1 over 3y minus 2. And then with this, we can tidy this up a little bit here, but what I'm going to do is just swap the x and y. So then that becomes, well, y is equal to minus 1 over 3y minus 2. And that is your answer. So that just becomes f of minus 1 over x is equal to. Now we can tidy this up. We can multiply the top and bottom by 1, by minus 1 to get rid of the negative. So then the bottom becomes 2 minus 3y. So here's some practice questions for you to have a go at. Press pause and have a go. Here are the answers. Mark your work. And now we're going to finish off by looking at 2 real exam questions. Now feel free to press pause and have a go at these 2 yourself before I go through them. So for the first one, we want to show that the inverse when you put a 50 in equals to 3. So the first step is to find the inverse. So rearrange this for x. And swap the x and y around. That gives us the inverse as... So now it's saying substitute a value of 50 in, and that should give you 3. So let's test that. So we have the cube root 50 minus 4 over 2. Now we know 50 minus 4 will give us 26. And let me just do that there. So that gives us the 46, divide that by 2. And if you do 46 divided by 2, you end up with 27. Oh, I made a mistake somewhere. So there we go. It's a plus 4. Right, that's a plus 4. I was going to say it wasn't making sense in my head. So that's 54. Now that makes sense because 54 divided by 2 is 27. So that becomes the cube root of 27, which is 3. Now with the next one, we also have composite functions. So it's probably worth watching my video on composite functions if you don't know what they are. So composite function is when you input a function into another function. So here we want to first find h of x, and then we want to find the inverse. So h of x is equal to the function of x with g of x going into it. Well, what does that become? Well, that's function of x. What's g of x? Okay, so we're putting this into the function of f, which then becomes g root 2x plus 3. Okay, so that is h. So now that we have h, we just need to find the inverse of this. So to find the inverse, same steps again, replace that with y. Make x the subject, so that'll be y cubed minus 3, divide that by 2 is equal to x. So the inverse, so now we're going to swap x and y around, so which then leaves us with the inverse as x cubed minus 3 over 2. And that is the end of this video. If you would like more practice, you can download the full worksheet over on my website. Do check out all my other videos, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.